Hello, sorry about that.
Natalie, can you start the webcast, please?
Thank you, Adrian.
Yeah, started.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the EFDC Audit and Governance Committee on the 25th of January, and time is 7 o'clock. Before I start, I have to read this out to you, which says, I would like to remind everybody present that this virtual meeting will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or another use by such third parties. Please can I also remind members of the public who have registered to speak that they will be admitted to the meeting at the appropriate time. Please also be aware that if there are any technical difficulties, the meeting will be interrupted and cannot be overcome, and I'm made to adjourn the meeting. Thank you. Right, that's better. Okay. Well, welcome everybody, members and officers. I'll adjust my screen. Okay, the item 2, apologies for absence. We know that Paul Keska, Councillor Keska, is trying his hardest to join us.
He is. No apologies for absence received, Chair.
Thank you. 3, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest from members? I take that to 0. 4, minutes from the last meeting on the 9th of December. Any comments on the minutes from the last meeting, anybody? No, I take it then that the meeting is agreed. If you can formally put that on the minutes, please. Next one, item 5, matters arising. Are any matters to be considered from previous meetings? Laura, that's Paul Keska phoning me. I've stopped it, so he's obviously in trouble still. I shall carry on though. Okay, so you take there's no matters arising. We're now on to item 6.
I've got to get one of my colleagues to ring. Okay.
Okay. The work programme, which is on pages 11 and 12. Do we have any comments on the work programme? Any additions, modifications, alterations, or anything else you might feel fit?
No.
Is that a no from everybody? I believe it is.
Yeah.
Okay, on to item 7. Internal Audit Monitoring Report, pages 13 to 92.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'll take that if you don't mind.
Thank you.
I apologise for the length of this report of ours. There's a lot of appendices to it, but it's that time of year that they've come. A lot of them have come up for our annual renewal. I'll take you through the report. So starting on page 14. So letting you know that we've finished another 2 audits. So we did the fixed assets one, which is a key financial control audit where we've given it moderate assurance. So on the positive side, we do have a fixed asset register, which is up to date. It's secure. We make sure that our assets are where they're meant to be, especially the IT ones where we do checks on those and the depreciation is being calculated correctly. However, we do have problems with year-end reconciliation and lack of procedures. So this stems from accountancy function that has been under-resourced, and now that we've got Chris Hartgrove on board, he's changing the structure of the accountancy function and making sure that those procedures are in place and that these reconciliations do take place. I'm not a technical person, but I know there are reconciliations happening. So there's separate reconciliations for each of the asset classifications. So they are reconciling those, the GL to the asset management system, but it's that main year-end one that is lacking, and that will be in place for next year. The other report is the customer services one, and we actually started this audit in 1920, and we had it disrupted because of COVID-19 March last year. So this audit was looking at the transformation of customer services. If you remember, we've had customer services. Yes, Laura?
Sorry, I'm just trying to mute.
We were bringing all our different customer servers into a central position, and they were all going to be located within the main building. It's all part of moving it on. So when we looked at this, we could see that good progress was being made, and there's actually been a reduction in the number of complaints. For example, the first quarter of 2021, there were previously 50 complaints, and then the following quarter it was reduced by 20 down to 30. And also there's greater resolution of first point of contact as well. So the customers, our residents, are definitely benefiting from that change, and it can be demonstrated. There's a big push across the council, what's called customer shoes. This is an initiative where there's a lot of training and awareness going on, and this manager training has helped to sort of diffuse situations so that complaints aren't being raised. So there's a lot of positive work going on. Moving on to the recommendation tracker, the numbers remain really low. I'm very envious of Epping of their low number of outstanding recommendations. 2 of them relate to health and safety, and the strategic health and safety group and the operational safety group is making sure that those are being addressed. Mandatory training has now been rolled out to all officers in the council, and that has to be completed by the end of March, and work continues on the risk assessment work and the level of awareness going across that. The third recommendation on the track is to do with the Harlow Gilston Town sharing agreement, and the lawyers are on top of that, and that will be in place soon. Moving down the report onto the other internal audit activities, just want to bring to your attention the amount of work that internal audit is involved in the grants. So the council's having to administer many grants, and it's been ongoing for a long time now. And internal audit, we've almost got a dedicated resource now helping them out on that. We're doing what's called spotlight checks, where we're checking that companies that are applying are legitimate and still trading. And also we've got the corporate fraud team helping with that as well, doing individual investigations where the suspect of fraud has arisen. Now we get down to some of the policies that I needed you to look at this evening. So we've got the local code of governance, a key document. It's not mandatory that we have one, but it does support our annual governance statement. This, in line with good practice, should be reviewed annually. There has only been minor changes from that we had last year, where we've put in about the impact of COVID-19 and about working in a virtual environment, and making sure we have robust processes when we have to make emergency decisions. Then we have the anti-fraud and corruption strategy. It is a long document, I admit, but that's mainly because of the appendices with that. We decided it would be good to have those all in one area so that staff wouldn't have to go around looking for it. So this has been updated in line of there's a UK-wide fighting fraud and corruption strategy, and in that they talk about pillars of acknowledge, prevent and pursue, which we had already, and then there were 2 new ones in this new strategy about govern and protect. So it's about making sure we got those frameworks in place to support our anti-fraud and corruption strategy. In the document there is a fraud response plan, and we will be bringing officers' attention to that, so if they've got any suspected fraud they know how to report that. There's also in there about the anti-money laundering policy, where we've beefed it up around not accepting cash, because there is a chance somebody might want to give us a large amount of cash pretending that they're which gets credited to their account, say their council tax account, and then they ask for the money back, and then that would come back as clean money. So we've put a limit on how much we would accept. Supporting the anti-fraud and corruption strategy, we have the whistleblowing policy, again reviewed on an annual basis. So this has been updated with contact details and timescales. And we do know that the whistleblowing policy does work. We had one recently. We had a person who was anonymous who brought to our attention something they thought was going wrong within the council. They did it through the complaints and comments process that we have at the council. We did look into it thoroughly and found there wasn't anything untoward. Unfortunately, we couldn't report back to the whistleblower because they'd done it anonymously. Then we have the internal audit charter. This is a real key document for myself. This gives me the role and remit of internal audit. Without it, I couldn't do the job. The internal audit team would struggle to get in and see people and to see documents. And it's compulsory that we have one as part of the public sector internal audit standards. The report goes on then, sections 11, 12, 13 and 14 to talk about the corporate fraud team. Martin Crowe, my corporate fraud manager, is here if you have any questions about that. And then lastly is an update on the skills and knowledge analysis. So thank you to everybody who submitted their questionnaires to me. So the table I drew up shows you that we do have a good spread of skills and knowledge across the audit committee, where it will help determine future training and also giving assistance to one of the committee members so they can understand their role better. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Quite a long report here. Questions? Councillor Heap, do you have any questions?
Why do you think that?
I have no idea.
Well, there are a couple that came up out of all of that. Are we sure about the reconciliations, even though they're not actually complete yet? Was one question. The customer services thing, the decrease in complaints is very, very good, obviously. But is that because it's too long-winded to get through? Is there any monitoring on that? The grant admin that you're doing, which, again, you obviously have to do, but I can imagine a lot of businesses look like they're shut because they simply cannot function. If it were entertainment, it might be that they've got a bounce back loan or a grant of some kind, but they might not be able to actually do any work. And the other thing that does come to mind is I'm still not sure that we have proper oversight of things like delegated decision making, and we don't. And because of that, we can't be sure of exactly what's happening. I'm not casting aspersions against anybody, but if it were, complying with any kind of strictures about enforcement or something like that, we don't have that control to make sure all the paperwork's delivered on time to anybody who's going to be threatened with legal action. Shutting up.
Okay, so I'll take those in turn, if you don't mind, Chairman. So the reconciliation piece is, yes, we're confident that will take place, but we have it on the audit tracker. So if they don't do what they say they're going to do, then it will end up coming to the audit committee. But we have a close relationship with the chief financial officer, so we know that that's going to take place. Calls taking too long, I'm pretty sure they've got a KPI on how quickly they answer their calls, but it didn't really form part of our audit, but I can ask that question if you want me to. Grants, so we use several mechanisms to look about when we look at companies. So we have something that's called Spotlight, where we verify the companies to the company house details that they have. We can also look on social media to see if there's an activity there, and also when these people apply for grants, there's paperwork that they have to submit to us. And then lastly, about the delegated decision making, I would like some more information on that because I didn't understand the question or what point you were trying to make. I apologise.
The point is there are lots of delegated decisions that could happen that, for whatever reason, say an application gets refused. There is a specific example, but I don't really want to go into the specific example at this point. But we're as councillors, we're unaware, because if it's a delegated decision, then it doesn't appear on the list every week of things that we might want to look at in a planning committee and call it in. So it's a way of possibly having an oversight of what's exactly going on. Maybe, once a quarter, just going through all of the decisions that have been made, just so we can see that we agree or not agree, or if there's an area that's failing or whatever. Similarly with enforcement.
I think you're talking specifically about planning here, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
If you've got a particular concern, should we have a conversation outside of this, and then I see if there's anything internal audit could or should be doing?
Yeah, sounds fair enough. Thank you, Councillor Heap. Who have we got here? Mr. Jarvis, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chairman. This may be a good thing, Sarah, but I'm surprised by the low number of changes to the policies this year compared to the previous year in the attachments. The 30 or 20 or 30 pages of the strategy, audit, fraud strategy. Given that what's happened over the last 9 months or so, 12 months or so, you've got, home working, you've got new services, you've got grants, you've got hub working, and you've got policy moving out. I would have expected to have seen quite a few changes to the way these control reports work and how far they go and what they do cover and what they don't cover, and changes, structural changes to what's really important to have in them. So it may be a good thing because they were very good to start with, but I'm just expressing a slight surprise that I would have expected to see a number of more changes to those documents for a number of reasons.
So in my defence, it is a strategy, so it's overarching and should cover everything that we do. And that's what it starts off by saying, this covers the council and everything that we do. So if we had, what you're talking is more operational detail. I don't know, Martin, do you want to jump in there?
Yes, I will do. Yeah, as Sarah says, I mean, sorry, excuse me, the strategy documents are seen to be overarching, that cover the authority and all of its operations, no matter how they function, in one overarching document, as it were. Sorry, do you have any specific things that you were thinking about that you think should be in there?
This isn't necessarily the typical one, but I just happened to be on the page of the anti-bribery policy. And it's not, it says this policy applies to all the council's activities, covers all staff. And I've had to find out separately that in this case, staff doesn't include Qualis staff.
No.
But all the council's activities are now different. And I know this is supposed to be a general term, and I understand that, but it's a bit more complicated now in my mind. And so I'm not suggesting a specific change. I'm just saying that I was looking to see whether there were more avenues that should have been investigated, or it's so overarching it doesn't really matter. Thank you.
That is the idea behind it, that it is overarching for all of the council activities. Yes, Qualis don't come under that at the moment, but they don't come under that. So the scope of it has quite sort of far-ranging parameters, and to cover the whole of the council's activities in general, rather than sort of specifying each individual kind of process of operation, shall I say.
Well, we're taking board what you've said. I think perhaps we need to make it explicit about it doesn't cover Qualis, and then get some assurances that Qualis do have theirs in place. Yeah, and I'll talk to Martin about it, because we do have the corporate fraud team, and we do cover the whole everything to do with fraud across the council. So thank you for your pointers.
Chairman, perhaps as an ex non-exec director of Qualis, I can confirm that Qualis have all their appropriate anti-bribery, etc. policies in place and were reviewed by the interim board. I think it was September, but you'll forgive me, Tony, if I can't remember the exact month. But they are there.
Thank you. Laura, I'm not sure, is Councillor Kesker here? We have a telephone person at the bottom. I don't know who they are.
I was just going to wait until the item had finished. I think this may be Paul Kesker. Paul, but it's muted. Paul, is that you on your phone? I know that Bob Jennings can't get through, and we can't get Christopher Hartgrove in or Sue Lindley. So it seems to be a random impact, because obviously the people on the screen have been able to do that. So Adrian's been looking at some stuff in the background, but we don't seem to be able to get those people in.
Seems to be some problem with Zoom as far as I can make out.
As far as we can work out, it's saying that you need to be an authorised user, which is now meeting's been set up.
Okay, well, let's just move on then. In that case, Councillor Vaz, you're the next one in sequence in alphabetical order. Do you have any comments at all? Oh, sorry. Basil?
Yeah, sorry. I was just talking to Paul, and he's completely locked out. He's tried too many times.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any comments, Councillor Vaz, on the report that we've been discussing?
No, I haven't, Ian.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Chairman.
Thanks a lot. Councillor Phillip, do you have anything?
Chairman, no, I'm here as an observer. I just would like to back up what was already being said, that I'm convinced that the Finance Department is making significant progress on rectifying some of our historical issues that we've had. We may not get it all done this year, but this one I think we probably will.
Thank you, Councillor Phillip. Well done. Well, with that then, I think I've got one question actually. On page 49, the fraud response plan, the 6th bullet point, where it says maximising positive publicity where frauds are discovered and dealt with. Sometimes when fraud is discovered and dealt with, you don't want publicity, especially if you're a bank or an insurance company. Do we ever have the same situations where we'd rather not tell people that we've been subject to some sort of fraud?
Martin?
What we've tried to do over the years is take a rational approach to publicity. I'm sort of a believer that no organisation is impervious to fraud, and I think that in some ways an organisation becomes stronger when they, for want of a better phrase, sort of admit that there has been a loophole, but they've actually found it and dealt with it. I take your point, as a lot of organisations that prefer to sweep fraud, particularly internal fraud and things like that, under the carpet. However, I'm always been a firm believer that as I said, that an organisation appears stronger when they actually discover it. We have in the past, particularly with fraud prosecutions, we have always sought to publicise them in the media, because we think it gives reassurance not only to our staff and not only to members. I think it gives reassurance to the residents and the council taxpayers that these things are being dealt with, that they aren't being swept out under the carpet. Because I think that sometimes there's a very sort of common attitude among the sort of general public is that when we discover stuff, we do sweep it under the carpet. We don't tell anybody about it, which isn't actually true. We are robust, and we will take robust measures to deal with it, and that's what we've always sought to do. I mean, I'm always open for a debate on this, but that's the approach that we've tended to take historically.
Okay, so that's the general view then, is it? That admit everything rather than don't admit or our tardiness in certain areas.
Yeah, I mean, we take every case on its merits, just like every investigation that we do. We look at the positives and the negatives of seeking publicity, and we take each case on its merits. And I mean, I can't think off the top of my head where there's ever been one where we would want to say, "Oh, do you know what? Actually, we don't really want this one to get out," so to speak. We look at the positives and the negatives, and most of the time, the positives for publication or publicising, I should say, outweigh the negatives in that regard.
Okay, thank you. Right, if there's no more questions then, shall we move on to the next item, which is item number 8, risk management, page 93 to 118. Just taking that.
That'll be me, Chair. Thank you. So the risk management report is attached to the agenda. If I'm honest, there isn't an awful lot of change in terms of the risk ratings since the last time the Audit Committee considered this report. There are some updates to the status. The main movements are summarised on page 94 and 95 in the headline table, and the detail is obviously within the appendix to the report. So say most of the issues I think will be known to members of the committee, and as I say, I don't think there's any new significant risks. We're just continuing to treat the risks that have been previously identified. Open to questions, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Questions, anybody? Tony.
Thank you. I've had a sort of an intro to this from Councillor Phillip, in that of all the things that I'm concerned about on the agenda, it's really the closure of the accounts, and I guess we're going to hear something about that more in a minute. But I'm very concerned about 3 years ago, it took 9 months, or say 2 years coming up now, 9 months or more to close the accounts. I know, Andrew, you weren't, I don't think you were around then, were you? Last year, we're still hanging around now of the closure accounts. And this year, which is likely, I imagine from your point of view, to be the most difficult to do, we've yet to hear whether there's a plan for that. And I think it's a very big risk in my mind, because if you lose control of the closure accounts, it interferes, I'm preaching to convert it, it interferes with budgetary process, budgetary controls, it interferes with sensible decisions, it puts people doing the wrong things at the wrong time of year. And eventually it severely damages internal control, because your basics aren't being done because of the crisis. So if there's a risk that runs across this risk register, and it is here, it is mentioned on page 100, and it was sort of an issue earlier on in the audit report and asset registers, etc. I have a concern here that this is quite significant, and perhaps needs, I don't know about it goes up the list, but anyway, it's quite significant. Now, Councillor Phillip, I think, said that action was being taken now to sort that out, but I guess the thing that would reassure me would be a sort of a joint plan between perhaps yourselves and the auditor to make sure and resource it, getting it right, because it's only 8 weeks from now that we're into the next financial year anyway. So there's a big running concern in me. That's the only point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I think Andrew on the next item, statement of accounts, will cover those things. Have you any other comments regarding?
Yes, Chair. I think something about the underlying process really, and where we are ready to give. I think, ironically, despite this year being late, on top of the previous years being late as well, actually I feel that we're in a much better place for 1920's closure of accounts than we were. Well, as you say, I wasn't with the council for the previous years, but to still take responsibility for making sure that the accounts are closed. So I think there were more. I think we were working through more issues last year. I think we got a much better handle on it as we brought the accounts closing process to a conclusion for 1920. In the end, we got to a position whereby we published our accounts in line with the statutory deadline. There are some issues around audit that which we'll touch upon in the next item on the agenda. But all of those, the last 2 years, about catch up and getting it signed off, getting it to the point of audit for 1920, leading into the audit process for 2020, 2021. I am of the belief that we're in a much better position to approach this year's audit in a pretty good position. We've had some changes in the accountancy team. We've got some good people on the ground now. Christopher Hartgrove has a very firm handle on the accounts closing processes and done an excellent piece of work in getting 1819s out of the door and doing the work to get 1920s ready as well. So I think the processes are in place. I believe I'm having a meeting with Craig Wisdom tomorrow to do some forward planning work then. And by all means, I think it would be sensible for us to put an accounts closing time frame or timetable in place to make sure that we do meet our deadlines this year as well. And I think it's a legitimate concern, and I think we need to be able to demonstrate to yourselves, the audit committee, that there is a process in place. Obviously, we work closely with the portfolio holder as well to share the planning process to make sure that he is comfortable with our plans and that we have the right resources on the ground to do that. So, despite 2 years worth of delays, I am pretty confident that we'll go into next year's with the staff on the ground and the capacity to make sure that we meet the deadlines on time.
Thank you, Andrew. Any other?
Could I just, a supplementary to that, is the Treasury management arrangements as well at the moment, or is that something?
To that?
Sorry, I've got a little bit of feedback there, Mr. Jarvis.
Shall I try again?
Please.
Yeah. The Treasury management report wasn't on the agenda this time. Is there any difficulty around that at the moment as well, or is that some other reason?
Largely a concertinaing of items really at this time of the year. So we are, as you'll be aware, that we are dealing with not just the usual budget setting process, a delayed accounts closing process, but also the council's response to COVID, and indeed the accountancy team is also impacted by sickness through COVID as well. So a number of the comments that are made through the budget development process is it isn't a standard year for us. It isn't the year that we have expected, and we have asked for some understanding, I think, from members to say that we are doing our best, but in a challenging circumstances. So some reports, Treasury management, will probably appear later on the agenda than we would usually have hoped, but still making sure it's been approved in time for the start of the new financial year.
Thank you for that. I appreciate all the comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any comments? Councillor Heath.
Yes, Chairman,
thank you.
If I could.
Are you going? You might want to speak about what I'm going to say.
I was just going to add it further on.
Well,
I might still do that, Councillor Heath. I was just going to add to what Mr. Small said, in that after the date for the sign off the accounts was missed, I've had the finance department primarily focusing on the budget because we have a hard deadline to hit the February council meeting for that. So that has definitely been the focus around what we've been doing. So other things, particularly as Mr. Small said, in terms of the COVID impact, both to the council and sickness, has meant some of the other things have been deprioritised. But you're quite right that getting the accounts right is key to getting next year's budget. But we need to make sure that we've got a budget so that we can set our council tax.
Okay, fine. Have we finished with risk management? Item 8.
Well, I was just going to say that it's going to get more complicated from this point on, isn't it? Because Qualis are going to be reporting 6 months before the budget is finished, and then it needs to know if there's going to be a dividend, or in fact they need to borrow. So it's going to be much harder for you in the future, Andrew.
Consolidation is a new issue, I think, for the 2021 accounts, and something that we'll have to work through. But as I replied to Mr. Jarvis, I think what we need to be able to demonstrate is a robust accounts closing process that factors in the time needed to do that piece of work, but also making sure that we have the expertise and staff on the ground who know how to do that consolidation work, and it's timetabled incorrectly. But yeah, it's a new dynamic. Usually, most years that there's a newer framework or change to accounting codes of practice that have to be reflected in the accounts as well. So there's invariably something different. Not made easier, by current events, but we will factor that in, and I am confident that we'll get the accounts closed on time for 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Hopefully for the last time, any more comments on item 8? Councillor Heap, do you have any final comments? Right, let's move on to item 9, Statement of Accounts for the 2019-2020 audit.
So, Chair, if I may, I'll lead on this one. Others may want to join in. The key message is that we haven't been able to produce a set of accounts for this meeting. I mean, obviously, we discussed at the last meeting on audit and governance about the issues that we faced in terms of meeting the deadlines. There was problems in terms of, we reduced the accounts in accordance with the statutory timetable, but through issues of sickness and other matters, our colleagues, external auditors at Deloitte, weren't able to meet the deadlines. At that point in time, whilst we hoped we'd be able to work on resolving the issues with external audit, some of the queries that they've asked us to work through, we've had to deprioritise, as we just explained, because the priority then was to get the budget completed. As you know, as Councillor Philip has said, that there's a hard deadline for doing that, and it's really important that we meet the deadline for publishing the budget. So, with limited capacity within the finance team because of sickness and other issues, we've had to concentrate whatever resources that we do have onto finalising the budget process for 21-22. And that means that there are some audit queries well, in fact, there's an audit query, I think it is, that we need to resolve still, but unable to put the staff onto that particular issue, which means we haven't reached a conclusion with our audit colleagues at this moment in time. But I'm confident that we'll get to that position for the March meeting of the audit committee.
Thank you. So the 25th of March, we can expect something, hopefully. I think we said this December. It is as well.
We did, Chair. I mean, as I say, at the point in time where the regional deadline was missed, it just fell slap into the middle of the budget setting process at that point in time. We would have been usually closing the accounts in a normal year, and bearing in mind that the accounts closing timetable was pushed back by government because of the COVID pandemic. So we were already up against budget preparation anyway, when we should have been doing audit and audit sign-off during the summer period. So with the subsequent delays, as I say, our priority has to be setting the budget at this point in time. I have to say, I think the accounts are in a pretty good state, really, for the most part. There is one query that just needs to be worked through. It's not as if there is a long list of outstanding issues that need to be identified. It is just the one, but we could have prioritised that, but that would have been at the expense of delivering a budget to council. And as I say, for statutory reasons, I think the priority was to make sure that the budget was delivered on time.
Yeah.
I don't know if Craig Wisdom wants to make any comment.
Yeah, I just concur with what Andrew said. There is there is a very small number of items that need to be closed down, and there's only one really of any substance which needs to be worked through, as Andrew said. So I don't. Once the resource in the council finance team can be redeployed to look at that, I don't foresee that there being any substantive delays to getting the accounts closed down and ready. So I concur with Andrew that I'd be confident if the finance team can give us the information that we can comfortably be ready for March. So I don't see any barrier to that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions there from anybody? Councillor Heap?
No, I'm excited about the report now.
Tony Jarvis? No. Basil?
No, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Phillip, do you have anything?
So, Chairman, I think between them they've covered it adequately, and I look forward to completing the budget and then being able to get the account signed off.
Superb. Thank you very much. Okay, if we've got no more then, we go on to item 10, any other business. And I don't believe we have any other business. Item 11, exclusion of public and press, which I believe we don't have. So, the next meeting, gentlemen, is the 25th of March, I believe, unless somebody corrects me.
22nd, I believe.
Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, for coming. The meeting finishes at 19:45. Thank you.
Thank you.